I'm Catherine Sheeran, host of the podcast Horse Tales with Cat. Today's guests have spanned the international circuit of show jumping for more than 40 years. Mac Cone is a two-time Olympian. He was a member of both the silver medal team at the 2007 Pan American Games in Rio de Janeiro, as well as the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. He remains one of only two riders who have ever competed for both the Canadian and American equestrian team. Brenley Cone is Mac's wife and partner in the business of Southern Ways. She has worked alongside Mac every step of his show jumping career. Welcome to the show, Mac and Brenley.
Thank you.
So, Mac, I'm going to start with you, but with both of you, what I'd like to ask is, when did riding start? I know you started when you were 10 years old and you were in Memphis, Tennessee, but I also read somewhere that you trained with Bert Denemeth, which is pretty much the godfather of riding for all of us. So how did that interest develop for you? Because I don't know that there was any family connection to horses in your case. So how did that all sort of unfold initially?
Well, I ended up taking the sport quite seriously and I did not want to go back I went 1 year to university. And I told my mother that I did not want to go back. I wanted to do the horses full time. And she quite quickly told me to get a job. That's all she said. And so I started looking through some horse magazines to see what jobs were available. And George Morris at that time had a job opening. He knew me through a clinic that I did, and and he said, I called him, and then he said, yes, I'll give you the job, basically a working student job. He knew I could drive tractors and muck stalls and also ride a horse. So he was starting Hunterdon, which was his stable in New Jersey, which was a new operation at that point. And so I just went up there, and I needed to try to ride with the best so that I could learn as much as I could, because Tennessee was not a great place to be to learn the horse business and riding and the top of the sport. So off I went, and then I trained with George I've been with him year and a half, and then he came up to me one night at the Madison Square Garden Horse Show and said, you've been invited to ride with the U.S. team.
Oh.
And he said, the next show they're going to is Toronto, actually, and they want you to join them there. He says, you won't ride on the Nations Cup because William Steinkraus, who was the guy of the team, that was going to be his swan song, his last show. But they wanted me to come on as a fifth rider because Steinkraus was leaving and they needed, younger people to come in and get going. So I ended up going and riding with the team there. And then I just moved into Gladstone. Basically, I took my horses and my clothes and off I went, and I parked myself at Gladstone for a couple of years and worked with Denemeth.
Oh, okay. So I guess in my head, I'd thought Denemeth started you and then you went to George Morris,
Oh,
but it was the other
no.
way around.
Well,
Okay.
Denemeth is like your PhD professor. You have to go through a lot of other stuff before you get to the top guy. And he was kind of like my final professor, other than everyone else in the world that I watch.
Oh, fascinating. And so at what point did you connect with Randy Rory? I know he was at Hunterdon. He was there at the same time you were a working student?
He was there when I pretty much left Tennessee and went to New Jersey to train with George Morris. He was there either then or I know I was the first one of that group there. He would have been there within 3 to 6 months after I'd been there. Yeah.
And as I understand it, it was kind of the who's who of riding, because wasn't that Bernie Traurig and Melanie Smith? Were they there at the same time as well?
Not Bernie.
No.
He was older than us.
Okay.
Melanie and I rode together in Tennessee. We knew each other in Tennessee. She ended up leaving Tennessee before I did, and she went to George before I did. So when I came up, there she was. And then the group that was there was her, Katie Monahan, Prudhomme, Buddy Brown. I'm trying to think who else was there. Brenley, can you help me?
Well, Randy, of course.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of the top
Yeah,
riders
that's the
again.
big one. Leslie Howard.
Leslie, yeah, Leslie.
Oh,
Howard.
right.
No, I was forgetting someone. Leslie Howard, yeah. Leslie
Okay.
Bird Howard, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking like that had to be some group. And the other thing was, I think not everybody knows that for most of you really experienced show jumpers, that you started with the hunters. That was the foundation, that was the basic, sort of beginning for really good show jumpers was riding in those 4-foot hunters. Was it not?
Well, I'm gonna slightly correct you.
Okay.
As a kid in Tennessee, the horses that we had then, they were mainly quarter horses or whatever, broncs or whatever. But mine were quarter horses, and you went into the equitation class, you went into the hunter classes, and you went into the jumper classes all in the same day. So that was my experience with hunters at that point. Then I went through all the jumpers that I went through with George and went through with Bert. And then when I ended up coming to Canada, and that wasn't until the late 70s, that I got back into the hunters again just to earn a living, basically, to help earn a living.
Okay.
It wasn't my number one ride.
Okay.
I did hunter train. I bought hunters, sold hunters, trained the hunters down in the US. Once I left the team and Brenley and I started our business, we did hunters then also. So I'm correcting myself a bit. But the heavy duty hunter riding would have been once I came to Canada in the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay. So then that leads me over to Brenley. Brenley, what was your connection with horses? As I mentioned to you earlier, I had not realized that you had been born and raised in Manitoba. And when did the riding start for you?
Well, I grew up with 5 siblings. I'm the youngest daughter. I have a younger brother. And so we always had horses. My mother loved them. And she started at a very young age riding, the milkman's horse kind of thing. She started pony club. She 3-day evented. She had the first pony club in Western Canada, Assiniboine, I believe it was called. And so that's kind of where I got my start. I didn't ride as young as the others. I think I was more like 8 or 9 before I started really riding. Then we came east and we got some ponies given to us. Sean and I did, Sean Hayes. And we had ponies, and Kathy Collard-Roy rode with us as well. And so that's kind of how we started. My mother was the main key to any of that. And we have family still in the horse industry and polo and racing and all that kind of stuff, as well as show jumping.
Okay. So what point did the two of you connect? My interview with Randy, he suggests that he used the two of you. So what's your side of the story? How did the two of you meet?
Well, Kathy was my best friend or is a very good friend still, but as a child, we grew up together. And Randy and her, of course, were seeing each other at that time. We were getting close to the end of our high school years, I believe, yes. And Randy would talk about this crazy friend he had, Matt Cone. He always said they had crazy fun together. And he would talk about him all the time. And then we met at Washington International Horse Show. My parents were very strict, allowed me to go to Washington International Horse Show with Kathy Collard-Roy because Yvonne Collard was the international judge. And that's how we met, was at Washington. And of course, Randy told Mac that I was coming, and then we met and went out during Washington and then again at the Royal Winter Fair. And then we were married a year later.
Wow.
So yeah, we were both very young.
So
young.
So I'm thinking, so you've been married, is it 44 years? Is it my math correct, or is it more than that?
Just so we don't have to tell everybody how old we are. No, just kidding. Just kidding. 50 years in November. November
gosh.
27th, we got married, 1974. So it's been a while.
Well, that's remarkable. And one of the reasons I wanted Brenley to, come on to this podcast was because, we're going to talk a little bit more about Mac's career, but I really wanted to lead with a little bit about your relationship because it's pretty unusual in the horse business for couples to be together for any great length of time, simply because I think of the stresses of the business and just the realities that you face day to day. But I also think the two of you have done it with a lot of I would say that I always note the fondness that is exchanged between the two of you. You both seem to be very respectful of each other. I see that Brenley is part of the business day to day when you're there at the horse show, when you're warming up, and she's at the in gate with you. And so I was curious, how did that all unfold for the two of you? Maybe start with you, Mac, on that. How did that all come to pass as far as just the business? And beyond, obviously you have a very loving relationship, and I'm sure it's been hard to work at, just as any relationship is, but just the way you've intertwined the business with your personal life in a really positive way.
Well, yeah, like anytime you're trying to have a marriage work and a business work, and then you try to throw the two of them together, you're asking for trouble. I wouldn't really suggest it to anyone. However, when we were first getting to know each other, I remember one night we were sitting in her sister's rented apartment, and we were in the kitchen, and I was kind of spilling out my desires and goals and wishes and fears and everything else to her about this damn horse business I was planning on having to get into, because I knew my days of being with the Gladstone USET situation were limited because they weren't donating horses anymore. People were keeping their own horses for their own children and all that. And my little dream world of being a picked rider to go to a wonderful place and then having horses just given to me to ride, those days were leaving me. And Brenley sat there and listened to all this and listened and listened. And I've never forgot that she would listen, and she also was interested in this crazy journey that I was talking about going on. And time went by, and then I had to go into business a little bit, and I called her up. I said, you got to get up, you got to come down here to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, wherever we were, Pennsylvania, I guess. I said, you got to come help me. I'm just starting this business and I need your help, and blah, 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 blah. And so there she was. She came and helped and stayed with me from early spring, I guess, and to the end of the summer. And then she announced that she had to leave. And I said, no, no. This business, we got to keep going here, girl. What are you talking about leaving? She said, no, I got to go back to school. I can't stay here forever. My parents aren't going to let me. And the times were different back then. You couldn't just say, I'm living with this guy, mom, dad, and they go, oh, that's nice. No, that wasn't the way it was then. So without going on with that anymore, I said, well, this is no good. You got to say. So I just hit my knees and proposed. And that was probably end of August, beginning of September, and we were married in November.
Oh my.
And then she's been stuck with me ever since then.
Okay,
That's
Brenley.
how it started.
Now, Brenley, was it really that practical of a proposal? Did he make it a little more romantic?
Yeah, he was pretty romantic. We were 19 and 22, probably. Matt just turned 22, I think. So yeah, it was, and it, I was really young, and my sister had gotten married at 18 and she just was going through a divorce. So that was all going through my head. Is this really a wise thing? But I knew that I really wanted to get out of Canada for a little while. I needed to, it had become very, very sort of close with all the hunt people and the pony club people and my parents. And I thought, I need to leave for a little while. And this guy's more fun than my parents. So I didn't worry about everything not working or whether it was going to work. You just put your head down and picked up a pitchfork when you had to and a water bucket when you had to, and kind of did it that way. But yeah, no, it was more romantic than that. He was
Not much like that.
So then tell me at what point, so you had the business in Pennsylvania. When did you move things north to Canada? How many years in was that?
Well, I'm trying to think when we actually started the business. Help me, what year would that have been?
Would have been 73, 74. And
Yeah.
then we moved back to Canada in 78.
What we did is we would, and it was actually a lot of fun. We had a pickup and a gooseneck trailer, and they were all these nice little local shows to go to in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area. They had kind of small little open jumper stakes, they would call them, which would be what we'd call the Grand Prix of the week now. And we just go for 1 day or 2 day, no hotels. We just, it was really fun showing. And we did that for a while. And then August got to be a dead time in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area at that time. And Brenley said, there's some nice shows in Canada that I know about that are on then, the Sutton Fair, the Hornby Horse Show. And then there was also a new show called the Cheltenham Gold Cup, which is an all jumper show. And I go, there you go. Let's go to the all jumper show. I like that idea. So up we came. And to make a long story short here, we went to the Cheltenham Gold Cup Horse Show, Sue Grange's show. She was Sue McNamara then, her and Don McNamara. Mm-hmm. Brenley and I had a great time with Don and Sue for the second year in a row because we came up twice. We enjoyed it so much. Well, while we were there the second year, Sue asked me, would I be interested in becoming her? Would I come up and train her? Because she was riding then.
Okay.
Not the hunters, the jumpers. And I said, yeah, what? We got no kids. We're footloose and fancy free. Nothing's really holding us anywhere. I said, the only thing is, and I'm glad I did it. And she was smart about it, and because she understood. I said, I'll come up and train you, but I want to run my own business, though, at the same time. And without taking a breath, Sue goes, I'll build you a barn.
Nice.
And she did. And it's the barn down the side of her indoor arena that's there still. Ariel, now her daughter, is in charge of it. It's still there. It's 15 stalls, and that's what she built that. So during the day, I would help her and train her in the mornings, and the afternoon and evenings. With Brenley, we'd run Little Southern Ways Equestrian, and we had a bunch of kids and horses in on training and hunters and all that stuff. And that's kind of how we got started up here in Canada. Yeah. And we stayed there for 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to say, talk me through a little bit the process when you opened your own barn, which I don't even know. Did you build the barn where you are currently in King? Or was, because I'm trying to remember, it seems to me like you always were very smart about not having, at least in sort of my knowledge of your business, having a barn full of clients. You had a couple of really good owners that were good people and also rode themselves. And I thought that was a really smart way to go. So I just wondered, how did that come about? That was with Sarah Houston, as well as Mark Samuel, as I recall. And I think they're still part of your business today, are they not?
Well, okay, one question at a time.
Okay. Yeah.
Brenley and I stayed at Sue McNamara, Sue Grange's for 4 years, which is a long time for a lot of people. It's a short time for me, but we thought it was a time to move on. And we went to Joker's Hill with John Weir.
Right.
And that worked out nicely also. And it was a large place. So they had 3 barns, 20 stalls in each barn. That's 60 horses. And it was a factory, to say the least. And it was just, yeah, a lot. And then that was another 4-year stint, I guess. And then Brenley and I decided, so let's try just doing everything ourselves. Let's go back, start Southern Ways again, and just do our own thing. So we ended up, after a short period of time, we rented a place, and there weren't many places around the Toronto area, believe it or not, back then. But it had 38 stalls in it. And we ended up putting 41 horses in 38 stalls. And
Wow.
there we are again on the big damn treadmill. And I'm thinking, and Brenley's thinking, this isn't why we got into this. This isn't why we were into the horses. And all I realized back then is you can't have 41 good horses, and you can't have 41 nice people, customers. You just can't. It's impossible. So there became a good friend of mine, Jeff and Annabelle Begg. They owned a farm right down the road from where we live. And we could walk to work, actually. And it was take the stalls as you need them. And so we got really small. And I think we could have 8 horses or 10 horses, maybe 12 at the most. And now we're getting a little bit smaller. There was available to go up to 15 maybe, because he had some race horses with his wife, Annabelle. And so we did that for a while, and we liked that. And then one day, Sarah Houston came over with her hunter for a lesson. And that's how I met Sarah. Brenley and I met Sarah. And we worked with her, and she ended up being a client right there at the Beggs place. It's called where it became a client there at Windways. And we'd go to Florida, and she would stay home one year, and she said, "What should I do while you're gone?" I said, "Just don't ride with stirrups. Don't ride." And don't you know, all winter long, she never forgave me for that. But anyway, when we came back, she said, Larry and I, meaning Larry is her husband, Larry Evoy, said, "We're buying a place in King. We'd like you to come over and look at it and see what you think. And maybe we can do something there, facility wise." And so Brenley and I go over and we look at the place. And of course, King Township property, there's not a flat piece of ground on the whole place. So it wasn't ideal, but we worked with Gary Van Bolderen, who's built all the places around just about way over 90%. And he said, "We can flatten this for the ring. This is okay for the barn. We can knock that hill down back there, give you a sand ring, an outdoor ring. And the paddocks, you just have a little roll to them." So anyway, we ended up designing, Brenley and Sarah and I designed a barn just the way we wanted it. And that's probably the barn you saw. The indoor arena had a little ramp to it because of the uneven ground in King Township, but that was okay. We made do. And we were there for 25 years. Larry and Sarah are just fantastic people. And 25 years is a pretty long time. And they also ended up owning Olay, who was our Olympic horse. So we all got a silver medal together. So it was a good story there at that farm. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that is going to lead me into the horses. So as I recall, you kind of burst on the scene, as they would say in Canada, for the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, correct? With Alute. Is that right?
I did go to the Olympics with Alute, but I'm not sure what you mean burst onto the scene.
Okay, well, I feel like that's where everybody knew who you were after that, because you won the Olympic trials for the Canadian team. And so I feel like you'd been showing for years, but I always feel like there's a moment when everybody knows.
Well,
So
I'm going to back you up a little
maybe
bit.
they knew you before then, but that's sort of the year that everybody talks about.
Well, I'll do whatever you want to. I can give you a little history before
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Give me a little history before that.
History
Then.
before that. When we were still at Sue McNamara, Sue Grange's place,
Mhm.
and a girl came in. Melanie Isbister is her name. She had a half Clydesdale, half thoroughbred horse, kind of fairly stout horse. And she asked me to actually ride it, and it went well. And we were up in Quebec, Saint Adele Horse Show, I believe. And I said, I'm going to put it in the Grand Prix. This horse can jump a little bit. So we do that. It ended up going quite well. And the next thing you know, her brother, who actually owned the horse, Malcolm Isbister, ended up giving me the horse full time. And we had it down in Florida. It was doing really well, and it jumped the American Invitational clean.
Oh.
I ended up getting contacted by Tom Gayford. And he said, Mac, we want you to ride on the Canadian team. So I got drafted again.
Okay.
I
love it.
For the US team. Now I got drafted for the Canadian team. So that's kind of cool. So I looked into it and I said, Tom, it depends on what passport you hold as to what team you can ride on. So I was up here as a landed immigrant, but I didn't have a Canadian passport. And he goes, well, what do you want to do? And I said, Tom, if you want me to ride on the Canadian team with you guys, Gayford, Ian Miller, and Jim Elder, and I said, this sounds pretty good to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Canada. I said, I'll change my citizenship. So that's what I did. The next summer, or the summer of that year, ended up competing for the first time for Canada at the World Championships with Jibber Jabber. So
that was the horse Jibber Jabber that you were riding in the States.
That was,
got it.
1982.
Oh gosh. Okay. So well before the Atlanta Olympics.
Way before 96. And then I had the next one that was probably fairly memorable would have been Pessimist, who was a thoroughbred horse. He won the World Cup at the Royal Winter Fair. That was a big win.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say Alute would be the next big one after that. Yes. And he went to the 96 Olympics. Yes.
Okay. And then fast forward to the Olympics in Beijing, and you're with Ole, who I feel like, just from what I've read in articles, just held a very dear place in your hearts. And I wondered what made Ole so special for you.
He helped win the silver medal. It's a good story. I know there are too many stories sometimes, but anyway, my friend Gabriel Koemans, who's from Holland, my original partner and dealer there, still is, was with me, and we went to a place and they showed us Ole, but they just said, look, he's not ready to be seen, but the next time you're over, come back and we'll let you try him. And that's what we did. And he was a small horse. He wasn't a huge horse. In the arena we tried him, and it wasn't that big. And he had been into work for not a long period of time. So I didn't want to do too much with him, but I ended up jumping a pretty good sized vertical. And then in my great wisdom, I jump an oxer, but I didn't jump the oxer too big. And I look over at the seller and I said, do you think he'll learn to jump these oxers? Don't you think? And he goes, absolutely, he'll learn to jump these oxers. And I go, okay, well, so I knew it was a dumb thing to say when I said it, but I didn't care. I wanted the horse so bad. I just wanted somebody, even if it was a seller, to tell me, yes, buy the horse. So that's kind of how we got him. And we went through some ups and downs with him and everything. But when it was time, he was 12 years old. We bought him, I think, when he was 7, coming 8. And by the time he was 12, when I needed him, he was ready to rock, and he just let her rip right from the word go. When I said, I need you at the top. He didn't mind being at the top. Some
Yeah.
horses like playing the game up the ladder, and then when they get to the top, they get shaky and they want to come back down the ladder. He thought the top rung of the ladder was where this is fun. This is where I want to be. And so that turned him into a really good horse for me.
Yeah, I like that you said that because I always feel like the really good ones have a bit of ego. And I always say if they were a person, they'd have a little bit of swagger to them. So I think that's interesting that you said that, he wanted to be at the top and he liked being there.
Yeah.
And then I was curious, I remember he had some sort of injury. Was it an injury or what happened after the first round at Beijing that you were not able to compete in the second round? Did he pull something, or I don't remember what the details were. I just knew that you weren't able to go in that gold medal round against the Americans.
Yeah, he jumped the individual qualifier.
Yeah.
He jumped that clean. It was beautiful, beautiful round, and jumped it easily.
Mhm.
And I remember telling Brenley that night, I said, Brenley, we're ready to roll here. He is rocking now. We've got a good chance of doing some damage here. He's really, really good. And she says, well, Norman Del Joya told me tonight, he said, you got Mac and LA, they look really good. They can have a chance to do some good here. And so we started out great. And LA was the type of horse, when he had a bad night, it was 4 faults. That was a bad night for Olay. He usually thought he'd be clean almost every time he got on it. Got to that point anyway, by that point of his career. So anyway, it was time the first round of the Nations Cup. And I go in, jump the first jump, fine, off we go. Down to the second jump, he falls right through it. I turn and go to the third jump, and it wasn't huge, but I had to work like hell to get him over it. And then the water jump is right away. And he always jumps on. I was having to go to the stick to get him over the damn water jump. And then I had the rest of the course looking at me. And somehow we got around with only 2 more down. And so we got through that first round with 12 faults. Olay doesn't have 12 faults, but he had 12 faults then. Jill's round after mine was even worse. So they needed my round. Ian went with 4 and Eric was clean. So they had to count my 12. So there we are sitting on the 16, which ended up, when the dust settled, it wasn't so bad. We were still very much front. So they counted it as that round for Olay and I. And then the next day, I think even that, didn't we know after his round, we knew he wasn't right. We went to the barn early. Usually we went as a group. Brenley and I got up, we went to the barn early and met our girl and got him out. He was dead dog lame. And had the vet there, and it was a tendon for sure, that we thought. And we go back and tell Torchy, the chef, Torchy Miller, and he says, well, let's just be ready to ride tonight. Just be ready, and we'll see how the horse is tonight. Don't shut the door yet. And that was smart.
I guess.
Don't shut the door, wait to the last minute. And the 3, Brenley and I and Torchy and Olay, we all get together around probably 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We all went before the rest. And he said, Mac, you can't. There's no way. So that was it. And but luckily, the great teammates that I had pulled through beautifully. And the only thing the only rail that Hickstead had down that entire Olympics was around that night. He went with 4. So Jill was going, Ian was going, and Hickstead had 4. So maybe, and that made us tied for gold. Maybe if we had had a way, he could have maybe helped Hickstead out. Not that Hickstead
Right.
needed much help very often, but that's the one thing I regret, that I couldn't be there to try to jump a queen, and then we would have won the gold instead of the silver. Yeah.
Yeah. And how does that feel when you're in that moment? I always wonder, is simply because one thing that I learned, I guess, just from speaking with Mario and Beth and Aaron recently, was just, it's a different kind of pressure when you ride for the team. It's different from riding for your clients, riding for yourself. They just said that they couldn't even really describe what it feels like exactly, but it is a different level of pressure. So what did it feel like for you? Are you just feeling, yeah, I guess I won't try to put words in your mouth. In that moment, obviously you're disappointed that you're not, also not getting to go on and do the individual. Let's face that as well. But as far as the team, what goes through your brain in that moment? Or do you remember? Because I mean, obviously that was also a long time ago. So maybe it's dampened over time, whatever feeling you had.
Well, not really.
Okay.
In riding, I'll agree with what Beth and Mario said, that the riding as a member of a team is a different pressure, different sort of pressure. And it's more about how you learn to pretty much just categorize that pressure in your brain, what you're going to do with that pressure, how are you going to deal with it. But I've been lucky enough, my first Nations Cup was when I was 20, 21 years old. I rode in 3 Nations Cup then. So I've learned to deal with that pressure for a long time. And I think the way you deal with that pressure is the way I deal with it, is the first thing I tell myself if I feel that little ugly bug trying to run around inside my stomach. I say, you just tell yourself, you know how lucky you are? You know how lucky you are to be here? Take it easy, boy. You're so lucky. Now just get on your damn horse. And as soon as I get on the horse and I feel his ribs, it's just, it goes away. And then I tell myself, oh, the only enemy here are the jumps and the course designer. It's not the other riders. They're not the enemy. They're not going to do anything to you. Those jumps will bite you in the ass, and the course designer set up traps out there to bite you in the ass. But these other guys, they don't affect anything. And so you just learn what works in your own brain to make things okay. And then you just go on with it. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to rephrase it. I think I'm going to think of that myself, that how lucky. No, I just love the idea that you rephrase it as, how lucky am I to get to do this? Because we're lucky even when we're not riding for the team and we're just going in and riding our horses. But I've honestly can say I've never thought of it that way. And then I wanted to ask Brenley, how do you feel when Matt goes in the ring? Because I always see you there, and I also have always noticed in the past that Mac would look to you for your feedback at the end, which I always thought was kind of, again, endearing of you, Mac, because I thought it didn't matter that you've been doing this for however many years. You were still, like any rider, looking for feedback from others on your ride and what could you have done differently. So, like, Brenley, what do you say to him, I guess, is a question, when he's going in or coming out, and what are you feeling in that moment?
Well, I don't say much when he's going in, because I figure he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'll say something about, the time's tighter, but usually he'll ask me, do you think the time's tighter? What did you think about that line there, or something? And if he doesn't ask, I don't usually intervene, because he knows what he's doing. I think my only concern I have is I want him to do well. I don't have a fear of him getting hurt or anything like that. It's just like, I hope he does well. And, he does always ask when he comes out. He likes people's opinion, not just mine, but, girl that works for us, the guy that works for us. I mean, he'll ask them as well. He doesn't mind criticism or somebody consulting with him about what they thought went right or what went wrong. I would assume.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please.
When Brenley and I first got together, she was 18, coming 19, like a horse coming 19, and I was 21, coming 22. And I keep wanting to curse on your podcast. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
We knew dick all about show jumping. We knew nothing about it. Nothing. And what we did over the years is we both together learned about show jumping. And not just at the medium level we wanted to learn the top level. That's the only thing that I ever was interested in. And Brenley drank the water, and she was only interested really in the top level too. Not that we then enjoy training younger ones, but that's what really turned our cranks, right? And we've worked long and hard for all decades and decades to not only learn the sport, but to keep up to date with the constant changing sport. And Brenley is one of the best grounds people now
Oh, thank you.
that you'll find anywhere. Her input is input that you shut up and listen to because it comes from years and decades and years and decades of knowledge and watching and learning and sitting, having a beer with some horseman that we really respect, or being around Ian Miller for 40 years and watching his journey and learning with him together. And I mean, yeah, so there's a lot to that too, is working together like you were talking about earlier in the podcast, and the knowledge that Brenley has acquired over all these years. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I feel like Brenley, you are a student of the sport. I don't know that people always recognize that, because even though you're not showing in the ring, you're there like every
I
step
know,
of the way.
And I'd have to say my mother she was a big one in saying, you never know it all. You learn something new every day. Take what you can from everybody else. She was very instrumental because she came from no horse background at all, right? So she had the good old, horse people that, taught her how to feed and taught her how to, what bedding to use. And so she really was that way, that you never know everything. You always have to learn every day.
Mm-hmm. So I just have a couple more questions. One question that I had for you, Mac, was about your approach with riding, because one thing that sticks in my mind from when I did train with you was I loved the way you described it, almost like it's a dance. That's how I remember you wording that on my horse. You were sitting on my horse and saying, what we do is it's almost like a dance with them, and anticipating, the movements. And I know that flat work for you is a really big part of your training, as it is for a lot of riders. But I think in your case, I loved the way you described it. So, like, what would you say to someone is kind of your basic flat training or approach? Because you've had many different horses of many different types, but I would imagine that your approach has remained the same, as far as, we do have basics that we do.
A lot of it certainly comes from my background, and that was the main reason I wanted to leave Tennessee, because I didn't just want to be, I don't know if you've seen the camel races where these guys get on the camels and they beat the camel, they run the camels.
No, I have not seen this.
I didn't want to just be a camel jockey. It's an expression I have. So anyway, I wanted to be more than that. And when I went north to be with George and then with Bert, it was just a total different world that opened up to me. And the flat work, or the dressage, as you call it, was so instrumental and important. And then I realized then the reason that they were hammering the dressage to me so much was that you won't get the other until you get the dressage first. So if you're in the ring for 80 seconds and there are 12 jumps and each jump takes a second, well, you take 12 off of the 80 and you're down to 68. Now, what do you do with the 68? Anybody can leave the ground and jump the jump. Now, what do you do with those 68 seconds, which are
Oh,
getting to the jump and getting away from the jump and going to the next jump? That's the hard part.
mhm.
The 12 seconds is easy. That's easy to do. It's the 68 seconds, which is the hard part. And that's, I, we need another podcast to get me going on what I think about today's situation. But yeah, if you don't do, and George told me something, he goes, Franka Sluttak, the famous German rider, he goes, George, it's not flat work, it's dressage. It's dressage. And Bert would agree with it. It's dressage. And that's, yeah, I can fix well over 90% of my jumping problems, never jumping a jump. I just go, I ask myself, what would Bert do? That's the never thing. What would he do? What would he say? You back up, you work on your dressage, and then go back to the jumps, and it's usually, boom, it's already taken care of.
And do you feel like that's a little bit of a lost art today? Because I guess my observation of at least amateurs going through the ranks today is everybody seems to be in a bit of a rush to get to the, the big heights before they've done the lower heights. And I wondered, does that mean that the flat work is a little bit lost today with new riders, or is that, I guess, can you speak to that at all? I'm just curious what you've observed from your end of
You're
the
opening up
sport.
another whole podcast.
I was just gonna say,
You're opening up a new can of worms here.
Maybe just one comment on it would be sufficient.
Is it lost? It's so lost. I can't even begin to tell you how lost it is.
Okay.
And because of it being lost, I would say the percentage of these riders that are trying to go on and do things and have great goals, they ain't going to get there. They are not, quote me now, they're not going to get there. And when I say get there, it means they're not going to bring medals home for Canada and for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen. When you have those riders, and let's just say we'll use the phrase European riders, those unbelievable, beautiful riders who ride, it used to be the US were the best riders, not anymore. They ride so beautifully, a lot of them. And their groundwork is so perfect, and their flat work is so perfect. And they can do the 12 seconds perfectly. They're just going to cook your ass every time. You're not going to beat them if your flat work is missing. How are you going to beat them when their whole system is so complete and so perfect? And then you come in up against those guys with a horse that's trained without the biggest part of the equation. That's your weakness. How are you going to beat those guys? You're not. And they only give out 3 medals. It's not down to 12th. There's only 3 medals. You know how up to snuff you have to be in all the departments, including your dressage, that blends to your basic jumping and then goes on into your more advanced jumping. You know how solid you have to be in all those categories to bring home one of those 3 medals? We don't have a chance. I don't see a medal right now coming home from Canada. I don't see it happening. Not for quite a while.
Yeah, I think your thoughts are echoed by many I speak with. So it is interesting.
So to answer your question, yes, the basic flat work that blends in with the jumping eventually, is a huge gap right now. And yes, I see so many people wanting to go up the ladder real quickly, but they haven't studied. Who have you studied with? tell me who you studied with. Who is your big mentor? Who's your second mentor? Give me the history of your apprenticeship. Let me hear that. And then we'll talk about where you think you're going to go. And how good the people who you are riding under and who your coaches are. Tell me their credentials. Then we can go from there.
We can talk about goals after that.
We can talk.
So just before we close out, I really just wanted to ask you, so what's on the horizon for the two of you in Southern Ways? You know, I mean, you've shared this passion for so many years, and it seems like you've achieved a lot of dreams. Is there anything kind of left on your bucket list that you'd really like to do that you haven't done as of yet with the horses?
Oh, the main thing is to retire rich and famous, I think. That's the main goal.
Well, you got the famous part covered for sure.
We got a silver medal in the other room there that sits in a box, keeps us company every day. That's a huge deal. We've run a nice business for a lot of years. We have a lovely home, and great family, great grandkids. So we're pretty good. We have a lot of, not a lot, but we have a bit of a breeding program that Mark Samuel has had some lovely show mares, and we've turned them into brood mares and have some babies that we're enjoying a lot. We're missing a horse or two at the very top right now, but I am 72, and I'm not sure there's a big lineup around the block there of people who say, let's get that 72-year-old man to ride the horse, you know, which is too bad because I think I'm riding as well now as ever.
I think so too. I concur.
But that's life. I mean, that's sport. You look at, I watch sports all the time, and even in people who are still performing quite well, if they're getting old, they're passed up, which is too bad. But that's that's life. That's life.
I think it's interesting, especially in riding, because I feel like it's one of those sports with the more experience you have and more wisdom, a lot of times brings a lot more to the ride than in other sports. So it is interesting that people pass up, you know, on age. But and then Brenley, any last thoughts from you as far as anything that you'd like to see in the future for the two of you?
I think we're doing what we are both enjoying to do. I tease Mac once in a while and say, let's go back into the hunters, Mac, and have fun with them. And he looks at me like, right, you have fun. I said, but you know, that was so much fun. Yeah, well, you have fun. So yeah, I think the babies, I've enjoyed that. And we have a few more up there that are a few mares in foal and stuff. So pretty much having a good time and enjoying the local shows. We've done quite a bit this year, which I've enjoyed that a lot because I've gotten tired of traveling, as we all do. But anyway, so I think what Max said is absolutely correct, that what we're doing right now has been fun, and who knows, you know, if he got another big horse, I'd be there helping him achieve his dreams and goals for sure.
Well, that's fabulous. Well, I want to thank the two of you so much for taking time out to meet with me and just sharing your stories. It's really appreciated, and I'm sure our listeners will love it. If you would like to learn more about the podcast and upcoming guests, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Horse Tales with Cat. Thank you both.
Thank you.